Let's build an app that shows the latest NBA highlights, which it can get from the NBA subreddit. If we filter by the highlights flare and sort by new, we'll be able to get these highlights from there. And then we can organize them in a nice web page like this. We can add a load more button to load more. And if we want to view any of these particular highlights, we can click on them and open them in a separate tab. Let's get started. To start, we're going to grab the starter code from GitHub. I'll put the link in the description below. So just go ahead and clone this repo. Make sure you do check out the start tag because I will be updating this repo with the finished code as well. So you're going to grab the repo, which I've already done here. Then you can do git checkout tags/start to grab that tag. And then you can do npm install to make sure you install all the packages. I've already done these, so don't worry about that. And then you can just go npm run dev to get our server running. So it's going to start up Vite. We've done that. And if we go ahead and run it now, there we go. We've got our blank application ready to start. So the first thing we want to do is figure out the feed from which we're going to get our data. So here we are on Reddit RNBA. If we go to the Reddit API documents, this is the one that we want. We want to use this /search endpoint. And there's a lot of attributes here that we can use. So what we're going to do is put that URL together. Now, if we go on Reddit and actually filter this out the way we want, we're going to get halfway there. So if we go sort by new and filter by the highlight flare, we can see here in the URL here that some attributes are getting passed. And this is actually very similar to what our endpoint is going to end up looking like. One thing to note here where you have flare %3a, essentially this is a colon, but in URLs you can't write it like that. You have to do %3a. That's the URL encoding reference here on W3 Schools. You can check it out and learn more about that. But essentially, this will encode it for you. So if you want to do flare : highlight here, and it'll convert that for you and show you how it needs to look like in the URL. So that's URL encoding. Now we want to put our endpoint together. So let's do that next. So here we are in the code. We're going to begin by going into our store modules in the highlights module. Now we've got some boilerplate here that I forgot to take out, so we will do that now. Okay, so what we want to do is create an action that we will dispatch from our home component. This is basically just a function, so we'll call it get highlights. And in this, we want a blank array called videos, and we're going to populate this with all the highlight videos, and we will create an endpoint. And this is essentially the endpoint from Reddit, which we will be fetching. So what we want to do is go to reddit.com/r/nba/search, and then we can pass the variables that we need. So query parameter flare, and remember we're going to do %3a for colon, and we'll do the flare highlight and restrict SR equals on. So what this means is you want to restrict all the search results to the subreddit. So in this case /RNBA, we only want results from that. Okay, and we're going to sort by new. Perfect. And time wise, we want to go through all. That's fine. And we can limit this to say, okay, just return 20 results for now. Now, one thing that's important here is that in Reddit, what's really cool is that you could use this in the URL in Chrome and just get the results back. You can also simply tack on a .json here and just get everything back in JSON format. Here, I'll show you. It's really cool. And there it is. Just like that, we have all the results that we need. This should be easy. So now we have our endpoint. So now what are we going to do? We're going to fetch this endpoint. We're going to use the fetch API. And then we're going to take the response, convert it to JSON, and then we're going to take the data from that. And for now, we'll just do console.log/data. And we want to catch any errors that we might have. And we'll console.error. And we'll say error getting feed. Great, so that is it. That will get us our data from the from Reddit. So let's test this out. Let's go to our home component, and under our script setup, we will import use store from Vuex so that we can then initialize our store here, and then we can dispatch that action that we just created called get highlights. Perfect. Let's see what that does. Here we are, it's already working. There we go, we've got our data coming in from Reddit. Perfect. These are our 20 results, and within each one, we can find all of the information that we need. Next, let's grab all the relevant information from the feed that we just got and store it in our Vuex store. So if we look at this data, this is what we're getting back. So inside that, we have another data attribute, so that's data.data. And inside that, we have the children array, which has the 20 results. This is what we need, and we want to iterate over these. So essentially, what we want is data.data.children. This is what we want to iterate over. So we'll use a for each, and we'll say data.data.children for each. And then for each item, we will iterate over that and store it in this videos array. So what we can say is videos.push. And we'll push an object for each result that we have. So what are the things that we need? Let's have a look at this. And then inside these, we have data as well. So every item has its own data property, and inside that is what we need. So pretty nested here. So we definitely need the name. This is a unique identifier for each video highlight or each Reddit post, essentially. And we need this because when we do load more later, we're going to need this pointer to decide which point to load more from. So we're definitely going to need name. So let's just go ahead and store that, and we'll say we're going to store name. And this is item, so this item here, so item dot data dot name. That should be correct. And then let's see, what else do we need? We need the title. We're going to use that in our front end. So item dot data dot title. We need the URL because that's where we're going to redirect the user to when they click on it, item.data.url. Now, there's one other thing, which is a little bit of a curveball. Essentially, that is the thumbnail. So we want the thumbnail, but it's not as straightforward. So the thumbnail is available under secure media, oembed, and then thumbnail URL. The curveball here is that this secure media isn't always available. There's plenty of links where this will be undefined. So we're going to need to handle that to avoid some errors later on. So we'll just handle it now. So item.data.secure media. Oops. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to say, essentially, this is an if statement. So if item.data.secure media exists, then your thumbnail should be, the information should be, will be found under secure media.oembed.thumbnail URL. And if it's false, that means that if this doesn't exist, then simply return a blank string here. Now this is going to keep us from erroring out when this is undefined. It's just something that we need to handle. Better that we just handle it here. It just makes it easier. So just to summarize what we're going to do here, we're going to get our data returned from the API, from the fetch API. And when we have that data in JSON format, we're going to iterate over data.data.children, that array with all the results in it. And for every item in that array, we're going to take these items out of there, store them under these keys, and push them as an object into this videos array, and we're going to do that for all 20 results. So just to check that that works, once this is all done, what we can do is we can, once we're done with the for loop, we can just log this out and have a look at it. So let's see what that looks like. And there we are. Here's our results. It's nice and neat now. We're getting exactly what we need. Looks like we've got our data feed. Perfect. So now instead of just logging out the videos, let's save it to our Vuex store so that we can actually use it. So we're going to have a videos blank array here, which we're going to populate. We're going to do that using this mutation. We're going to do set videos. We're going to take in the state and accept a payload. And we'll do state.videos.push. And now here we're going to need to use the spread operator with the payload. And I'll explain in just a minute the difference between if we were to use a spread operator and not use a spread operator. We're going to need to use commit, so we'll do that here so that we can use it. And then right here, we will commit this. So we'll call that mutation using commit, set videos mutation, and we will pass it the videos array. And with that, we should be able to populate our state, and let's test that out. So to test that the videos are being stored correctly in the state, we can display them in the home component. We'll just simply list them out for now. To do that, we will need to use a computed property. So we'll do computed from view, and we're going to use the composition API to do this. So here we'll do const videos computed, and we will return store.state.highlights.videos. Perfect. And now in the template, we'll do a v4 for video and videos. We'll give it the key of video.name. And then here we can do video.url is the link. We want to open this in a new tab. And then this can be video.title. Okay, I think that should work. Let's have a look. All right, excellent. So we have the list of 20 videos from that feed. And if we click on one of them, it redirects us to the actual video. Excellent. So now we know that our Vuex store is working and we are correctly storing these videos into our video state here and then accessing them through a computed property. Now, coming back to this spread operator, if we were to not use a spread operator here and save this, let's have a look at what happens. Look at that. So when we have an array of objects with multiple keys in them, we need to use a spread operator to make sure all the elements of an object are included in a list. So if we use the spread operator here and go back, we can see once again, our list starts working. So next, we want to take all this data that we're receiving and display it in a nice formatted way. We're going to show thumbnails and the titles and in a nice grid view. So these thumbnails that we're going to have will be individual components. So we'll create a new component for them. We can call it highlight item. In the setup, what we need is we need to take a prop which will contain all the information about the highlight, the thumbnail, the title, its URL, etc. Let's use this opportunity to learn about define props. So when we use script setup here, how will we have our props coming in? So let's do that. So what we need to do is import define props from view, and then we just make a const for props where we will call define props, and in here we will have our props. So we will have highlight, this will be an object, and we'll call it required. Great. In our template, for now, let's just do a div where we will just have the highlight title, just for testing purposes. So here what's happening is this highlight item component is going to accept a prop called highlight, which is a required prop, and it will be of type object. Okay, perfect. So now what we're going to need to do is go to our home component and update that. So rather than in our v4, rather than having this hard-coded href here, what we can do is for video and videos, key video.name, we will go ahead and remove this, and here we'll have a highlight item. And here we will pass it the prop highlight, and that will be the video that we are using here. And that should be good. So we lastly got to remember to import highlight item from, okay, everything else should just work out of the box. Okay, so this is working. These are coming in from the component. So next, let's do some styling on the highlight item. Now we're going to do a bunch of Tailwind CSS to do the styling. For this component, we want the whole thing to be in an A tag because it's going to be a link. So the href will take this link from the prop, which is the highlight prop, where we have the URL. So that's our link. And then the target equals blank because we want to open this in a new tab. So here we're going to have our video thumbnail plus caption container. So this is our main container. So we'll create that div. So this main container will have a border, light gray. So we'll give it gray 200. And then it'll be rounded. We'll give it rounded large. It'll have a small shadow. It will also have a pointer for a cursor because it's a link. And we'll give it a width of 96, which is 24 rem or 384 pixels. So that's our main container. All right, so let's tab over to Chrome and see what that looks like. Okay, so it's a gray box right now. All right, let's add to it. So now we're going to create the thumbnail. Let's see here. We're going to have a div for that. Now, with the thumbnail, remember, there were two things. When we were getting the data from Reddit, we saw that we may or may not receive a thumbnail. So we need to handle that here if we don't receive a thumbnail. So we'll put a VF statement here, and we'll say if the highlight prop has a thumbnail. So if div VF highlight dot thumbnail, then over here we want to show the image, and that will have highlight dot thumbnail. That's where we're going to find that image from, the link to that image. Okay, I think that should be good. So if highlight dot thumbnail exists, then that's our image. And now we want to handle the else case for this, and that means that if no image was found, we'll use placeholder.png, which is in here in the public folder, so we can access it directly, and it should be in your starter code as well. So let's have a look at that. So here's what we're looking at now. We have our highlights showing up. We have all our thumbnails showing up, so that's a good start. Let's see if we have any placeholders in here. Yep, there we go. We got one. So no image was found here, so the placeholder is used. Okay, still doesn't look perfect, so let's style these thumbnails. So we'll do class. We want it to be rounded, so let's have a look at that. Okay, these are rounded here. Now, what we wanted to try to create was a sharp, solid line here before the caption comes underneath. So we don't want it rounded from the bottom. We just want it rounded from the top. So we can do that in Tailwind. We can say rounded top, and we want it to be large, and then rounded bottom to be none. So let's see what that looks like. There we go. We have a nice rounded feel here, but it's nice and sharp at the bottom. So that's cool. Let's use that same thing here. We'll just copy and paste for now. We won't bother creating a class for it. Okay, so that's our thumbnail. Now we want the caption, and with the caption we want a p tag, which will have highlight.title. All right, so we've got our caption there. So what do we need? Let's see, we need some padding. So in our caption container, we'll give it some padding. Yeah, that's better. And then let's style the font and everything here. We'll make it semi-bold, and we'll make it dark gray. All right, that looks really good. Actually, I think that the highlight component is all the way there.
However, we can see that this is not in a grid form. They're just kind of stacked on top of each other. And that's because we need to update the home component to manage that. So what we want to do is this thing needs to be wrapped in a flex box, this v4. So we'll do that. We'll say flex. And so it needs to wrap around. So we'll give it flex wrap. And then the width of this container will be the full size of our viewport. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's good. Let's give it some margin from the bottom. We're going to use that later when we do load more, so that it gives you like some space down here before the load more button comes. So we'll do that. Still, these are kind of stuck together from the right and the left and the top and the bottom. So we can fix that in the v4 div. We'll give it some margin bottom of 4 and some margin right of 4 for every single highlight item here. So this will give us some space between these. There we go. And now our grid is coming together. So while this does look pretty good, there's something that I've noticed here which is a little annoying, which has to do with the captions and the size of them. Some of them are on 3 lines, some of them are on 2 lines, and it's making for this very uneven looking grid. So I'd like to clean that up a little bit if I could, to make it a little bit more uniform. So let's see what we can do for that. There is actually a plugin for Tailwind CSS called Line Clamp, and what that will do is it will clamp this to a certain amount of lines. So if I only want the caption to be 3 lines, I can use that tool to truncate everything beyond that. So let's try that out. It's a good opportunity to experiment and learn that tool. So to do that, we will go to our terminal, and we will need to install Tailwind CSS /line clamp. So that's what we need. I'm going to stop the server and restart it just in case. But first, I am going to update my Tailwind config. So in here, what we need to do under plugins, in the plugins array, we're going to require @Tailwind CSS /line clamp. And that's all we need to do. You can go back to terminal and I can run my server. Great, so now we're ready to use line clamp. So it's really simple. All you need to do is add the line clamp class to the block of text. So in this particular case, it's the highlight title. So here we'll just add the class line clamp. Let's make it 2 lines. So have a look at Chrome. There we go. So 2 lines, really good. Maximum 2 lines. So this row came out really well. Interesting. So some of the thumbnails are different sizes, and since we haven't defined a static height, they will change around like this and make the grid uneven again. For this particular demo, I think this will suffice. This looks pretty good to me. So the last thing that we want to add to our project is a load more button, which fetches the next 20 highlights. So first, let's figure out how the API endpoint would change for that. So this is the default API endpoint that we hit. And if we go over into Chrome, we can see here that we're getting 20 results back from that API endpoint. So here's our 20 items in our children array. Now to get the next 20 items, what we need to do is append and after equals and put in the name of the last video that we have received in order to get the next 20 items after that particular video or that particular post. So in this case, how we get that name is in the array that we're getting back, the last one. We're going to go ahead and get the name, and there it is. So we copy that, and then we can put that as our after attribute, and that will give us the next 20 results. Great, so that's what we need. Now to implement that in the Vuex module, the first thing that we need is we need the last video name. So we'll make a getter for that, last video name. And this will take in the state, and okay, so what we want to do is the videos array may be blank, and in that case we don't have a last video name, of course, so we want to check for that. So we'll say if state.videos.length is greater than 0, In that case, we want to return from the videos array, we want the last one, so we'll say length -1 here, dot name. So what we want to do is return the name of the last item found in the videos array state. And if there is, if the length of the videos array is not greater than 0, then we'll just say else return null. I think that should do it. So that'll give us the last video name, and that's a getter that we can use. And what we're going to do is refactor our get highlights component. So we're just going to use the same, get highlights action. So we're going to use the same action to get the next 20 videos as we are using for the first 20 videos. So what we'll do is we'll say if getters.last video name. So if there is a last video name, then just on the endpoint append the following. So we want to append and after equals, and we want to give it the last video name. So we'll do getters.last video name. Oh, and by the way, before we can use getters here, we need getters to be passed up here. So that should allow us to do that. Perfect. And I think that should be all we need. Now we want to go into the home component, add a button for this. So we'll create a container for it, and we'll say button type equals button, and we'll give it some styling on the button. So we want to give it some padding on the x-axis, some padding on the y. We'll make it rounded. We'll give it indigo 600. Text can be white, and we'll give it some bottom margin to keep it from sticking to the bottom of the screen. And we'll say load more. Yeah, one more thing that we need to do is on click, we want to handle that, and we're going to call a function called load more, which we will create down here. We'll say function load more, and in this we're just going to go ahead and do this dispatch again to the get highlights action. I think that should do it. So let's have a look. Let's refresh this, and we can see here when we go to the bottom there's a load more button. Oh, it's not centered. We want it to be centered in the screen. Let's do that. So what we want to do is use this container div. We'll make it a flex box, and we'll do justify center, and that should move it. There we go. And now if we click on it, great, brings us the next 20 highlights. Go to the bottom, click on it again. Perfect. Looks like it's working great. So there we have it. We've used the Reddit API to fetch posts from a specific subreddit, in this case /r/NBA. And then we're filtering those posts by the ones that are highlights using the flare filter. So posts that are tagged with the flare highlight, we are getting those, and then we're getting the metadata from those to show the thumbnail and to link to the actual highlight. And we're getting the title back and formatting it nicely here as well. And we're handling posts which may or may not have thumbnails in them as well. And we did all of this using Vue 3, Composition API, we used Vite, and we used Tailwind CSS along with Vuex. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you for watching.